I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I've done a lot of pitches. I've seen a lot of pitches, done a lot of PR. People think that people care about data or they care about numbers. We are hardwired as mammals, as human beings, to respond to stories. Sitting by a fire, somebody telling a story, people surrender themselves when you tell stories. Somehow people feel like they have to get all formal and use numbers and use data to support it. People remember and respond to stories. That's the big takeaway today. So what I would love to hear from our three panelists are, what is your story of your company? Tell us your story, and then we're going to dissect what makes a great story. Please, over to you. Imone.
Thank you for butchering my name even more than I thought was
did
possible.
Imone, sorry. I apologize.
So I'm here for Lazada, which is the largest online shopping mall in Southeast Asia. We started in the beginning probably not like most startup stories happen. It was driven part by design, but also very much by the machine that was Rocket Internet at the time, poaching out of all the top consultancies and banks in Europe, and promising riches and exciting opportunities for young, hungry guys. And I think, at the onset when Mac was building his team and, some of the critics were saying, well, what are a bunch of white guys going to do, late 20s going to do in Southeast Asia? And I think, over time, it's been a hell of a ride. When you look at it from outside, it looks a little bit cleaner than what it was in the inside.
As they do.
And yeah, so I think, we started by saying, hey, we're going to build the most professional website that's going to be customer friendly and going to be a really B2C platform. And we started by doing retail. And after a year, we realized that we had to completely shift the model to a marketplace model. And then, we were at the time doing retail. I was here in Hong Kong, and we were doing our private label brand, right? Because we said, look, what do retailers do when they want to, build a bit of margin? They build their own, which was, pretty much an utter disaster. We started sourcing, from factories in China with very little, understanding of how to do this. We were negotiating terms, and we put these, products that then came back to Southeast Asia, and we were having lots of problems with. And we realized very quickly that, the same factory, had a stash of products on the side that they were producing much better quality and selling on eBay or Amazon. And overnight we pretty much invented our cross-border business that we have today. That way, and I think that was telling of the constant push that you need to have to reinvent yourself and find new avenues and routes to build up your business, even if the overarching goal you set yourself might have 50 different ways to get to. So yeah, so today I think we still managed to do that. I mean, we've launched just this year, we've launched a marketplace within a marketplace, which was a Taobao collection. We started doing that with a sort of my credit card, buying products and shipping them over to test the process. This was, 6 months ago, and now we are, fully integrated, enabled basically the Taobao merchants to list on Lazada automatically. And so I think you just keep on doing this over and over again.
Wow, what a ride. Interesting. And Lillian, over at 9gag, 80 million unique users every month, 150 million across social. 9gag is one of the gems of the Hong Kong startup ecosystem.
Thank you. 9gag, if we talk about it as a brand, I would say is for millennials, especially, getting to the essence of storytelling, I need to be brief. We share 1.7 billion videos every month, reaching a total of 150 audience. We have, that is all about numbers. We have 41 followers on Instagram and 36 million followers on Facebook. We're a company that focuses on distributing social videos, especially amongst the millennials. So that's the story. But if you ask me about, the branding of myself, then every time when I have to tell the story, I have to be a little bit different, because the story has to change or evolve across different situations. So next to the two gentlemen here, say very few women in tech. Looking around in the audience, I would say I'm one of the oldest. I'm one of the oldest executive in the startup field. So that's my summary.
Your story, you're the Sheryl Sandberg of Hong Kong, actually.
Oh.
That's
Amazing.
I just made that story up.
Amazing.
My mom will be proud.
And over to you, Kyle.
For sure, for sure. So, and we'll get into some fundamentals of storytelling, but I'm obviously in the entertainment industry, and so storytelling is what we do for a living. And I'll kind of, without getting into the mechanics, maybe we'll talk a little bit later, but tell a story in two different ways. So the traditional way of telling the timeline way of telling your personal story is, and this is mine. I was a banker out of school, got tired, ran a startup. Eventually went over to a talent agency, joined a rock band where I didn't play an instrument, but helped them build their business, and now at a traditional media company running innovation. So that's the timeline story, and yes, you got the facts to your point about people wanting to talk about big data, but let me tell it a different way. So, when I started out of school, I wanted to build a foundation in finance, and I felt that was going to be really important and a tool that I wanted to have in my toolbox for the rest of my career. After 4 years and realizing that I had enough information, I wanted to kind of follow my passion and kind of explore what that passion might be, and maybe something a little bit more creative. And I bumped into a small group of kids who were really looking to create an agency, and then I wound up joining them, and we built an amazing influencer marketing agency when it was very early and became very successful. That then got us on the radar of a large talent agency called Creative Artist Agency, and I eventually got poached and plucked from this small boat and brought to a massive ship where they were working with the biggest talent in the world. And while doing that, obviously bumping into talent, I bumped into a small rock band, maybe you guys have heard, called Linkin Park.
Linkin Park.
And over lunch, we had a conversation about the music industry and kind of the macro perspective of where it was evolving to, and obviously, as we know, kind of how the music industry has changed, and they were looking to change as well. And so I came up with some ideas with them at that lunch and eventually joined them to embark on that mission to do that, which eventually took us to building a venture capital fund, and we eventually invested in a lot of startups that you guys have probably heard of, like Lyft and Blue Bottle Coffee and Hyperloop. And kind of looking at traditional music and how that was evolving, I eventually joined a traditional media company where I am now at Viacom and doing a similar thing where traditional media is obviously being evolving into a different space, and we have to think about media and entertainment differently, and now running the innovation lab, I'm hopefully helping a traditional media company disrupt itself before it's disrupted by, obviously you guys who are coming into the industry. So,
good story, great. Hey, we're about halfway through the session. I wanted to take a question in the middle, shake it up a little bit, then we know when we have to cut it short. Anybody have a question about storytelling? Anything from the audience? Please do it. What is the key component? I'll repeat it. So that's actually, thank you very much for that segue. That's actually
Perfect.
The second half of what I was going to cover. What are the key components of storytelling, and or maybe one component, or maybe a story that you've heard that really had an impact on you? Anybody want to jump on it first? Yeah.
Well, I guess there are lots of millions of books about branding that you can get from a bookstore. You don't need to come here and hear about a theory. But from my personal experience in the past, there are two things that you can't or you shouldn't. That first one is you can't be greedy. You can't be, let me refer to one example in the past that I was working for a bank that I was discussing with the chief marketing officer and the team, and they say, so we're discussing what's the key proposition or key selling point in terms of the key brand promise. They wanted a long history, they wanted the most comprehensive products, and they want the best products, and they want the customer service. And by now, but kind of like everyone will get lost. And since 2015, there is an official study saying that human lifespan is already 8 seconds, which is shorter than goldfish. So you can't be greedy. Lots of stories because no one will remember So that's
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I wasn't paying attention.
officially human attention span is 8 seconds.
I know, crazy, huh?
That's shorter than a goldfish. So you can't be greedy to tell lots of things, simply wishful thinking that the more the merrier. It's not. So you got to be focused, very straightforward. And second is you got to be believable. David Ogilvy once said, your customer is not moron, she's your wife. But from my personal experience, your customer or your audience is your mother-in-law. No one can fool their mother-in-law, right? So you got to be very honest. You can sugarcoat a little bit, but you can't lie. Sooner or later, they will find out. So I guess this is one of the key
I'm really
points.
afraid of my customers now, actually. I'm really afraid. So that's a really good insight. And I think you also talked before about when you worked at an ad agency that people tried to like make up stories, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was a very horrible memory of mine because for once I'm not disclosing the brand, yeah? But for once I had an experience of working up a brand promise for some wipes that clean butts for women. So the functional benefit of that is, of course, you use cleaner wipes, then your butts will be cleaner, right? So you can only, at most, you can talk about refreshing experience, but the client insisted they want to bring out the inner confidence of women. And that's not believable. I mean, how many times I wipe my butt with that thing, I won't be more confident. So you got to be, very honest, and you can't stretch because no one will listen to you. It's a bloody waste of advertising dollars, I would say.
So authenticity, right? You can tell a story, but the story has to be real. If people think it's bullshit, then they're not gonna buy into it, right?
Yeah.
I think if I were to break it down to maybe 3 kind of key fundamentals about telling a story, especially from a startup perspective, the 3 would be kind of macro context. So making sure that whoever you're talking to understands not just what you're working on, but how it sits within the context of your industry, maybe even your country, whether it be kind of GDP changes or GDP per capita changes that may be, leading to different types of buying power, or whether it be government incentives that are helping to open up a market that you guys are exploiting. So macro context. The second one being milestones. So know exactly where in the life cycle of your startup you are. So in the beginning, when you're trying to have a proof of concept and have a minimum viable product, you're just trying to maybe growth hack and actually get people to come onto your platform. And that's very different than thinking about telling a vision story and doing more traditional marketing. And that speaks to kind of a larger vision of where the company may go, which might be kind of in your later stage after you've proven out your primary concept. And then the third kind of point is make it like a movie, right? Movies, who knows Star Wars? Who knows the movie of Star Wars?
Boom.
Who knows Luke Skywalker, right? I mean, these are characters that are cemented in our hearts and in our minds, and they're really all built by a very core fundamental way of telling stories. And you guys should go look at this later, but there's a guy named Joseph Campbell. And if you guys have heard about the hero's journey, have people heard about that? A lot of stories all fit a traditional template that Joseph Campbell, who's a mythologist, an American mythologist in the early 1900s, really broke down. And if you now look back at your stories, you'll realize that you talk about the hero, which is in your case your startup. Obviously where the path in which you're going to go, the trials and tribulations you may face, and overall how you're going to overcome, and really kind of building that into your story I think is really fundamental.
Love it.
It's also, a big part of your story is actually in the end told by others, right? And those others are those that interact with you in your actions or have, seen your product and, actually engaged with it and found that, half the things you told them was bollocks, or worked with you and you were unprofessional in certain meetings. So I think, there's, on the one hand, as a consultant, we spend 60% of your time was doing stories for clients, right? Even as in McKinsey, which tends to be very numbers driven and so on, but in reality, whenever you engage with a partner, it's always about the flow of your story, how you're engaging your client and understanding his context.
Exactly.
And those, this is stuff you can read up a lot about, right? There's lots of frameworks, there's lots of approaches, but what you always need to focus on, I think, is how professional and focused and you are, because in the end, it's the others that are going to be telling your story more than you just blabbing it out
That's a
constantly.
good point. They always say the story, the best story or what your real reputation is what people say about you when you're not in the room, right? And so to your point about other people telling your story, that's a key. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
especially when in this era, for any customers who are not satisfied with your service or product, they can just tweak it, right? So, I mean, it will be like, boom, it will happen anytime. So all you have to do is, as much as you fix that single, very compelling story, you have to live up with it, because that will be backfire anytime, anywhere, when you're in bed or when you're on a plane, which is totally out of your control. So I guess the persistence or the focus or consistency would be very, very important too.
Great takeaways. Anybody else have anything else to add? One last question. Anybody? Question, comment? In the back there, please. If we can't get the mic, you can kind of,
Shout.
say it, then I can bullhorn it. Okay, we get the mic coming.
Thanks. How do you keep your story endearing after you become Viacom? Because your story started as a timeline, and it was cool that you started with a small group, and you found a small group, and then humbly you went to CAA, and then humbly to Viacom. How do you keep the story endearing at Viacom?
Personally, my personal story, you mean, or Viacom story?
Or maybe better, it's like once a company becomes larger, how do they keep that connection and that story going?
sure.
It doesn't become a behemoth that is,
sure. Well, I think a large behemoth of a company, is still going through different phases. There's macro changes. For example, to your point about about Viacom being a large company or any large business, there are macro changes that happen in the environment that large businesses have to adapt to. And so I think telling the story about how you're approaching those macro trends and those trade winds maybe is one way of telling the story. The other thing is there's a lot of micro stories to be told. There's a lot of smaller chapters within the larger book, right, that you're telling, which all have smaller characters, that are playing these roles. So for example, if you take a large company like a Viacom, within Viacom, obviously you have Comedy Central, you have Nickelodeon, you have Paramount, and all those different properties, for example, all have IP who all have unique stories to be told. So I think, even if you look at Disney and the way they're able to tell you these Pixar stories over and over again, we all know the story of Pixar, but we also know the exact last movie that they had and that character and what the trials and tribulations of that one character had. So I think even though it's large, it's about breaking down the stories and the chapters and the characters within that larger vision, that larger story.
So Lazada is one big brand, but you guys have grown probably faster than most startups in the history of the world. So how have you managed?
No, I find the story is now 10 times more exciting, both to tell and to think through, right? Because if before, we were struggling to plug in printers, or the store often shares, one of our big problems at some point is we're selling lots of diapers, which is a great product for a mother to attract the mother as a consumer and build a story around it. And obviously we didn't have a warehouse at the time. We didn't really have a pickup network, so we had interns going to Tesco and writing emails. On Gmail on how you could fit more diapers in the back of a car, right? So maybe the story is, at that time we were thinking very big, but we also realized the limitations of what we had, and now I think there are some incredible stories that I kind of think up at night of what we can do, and I think that comes with scale, right? So I think with size, there's more imagination.
That's great. Now you guys can sell unlimited butt wipes. Right?
Exactly.
So
Butt wipes is actually
excellent.
one of the
Thanks.
great
Big round of applause for everybody. Thanks. That was great stories. Thank you.